How's it going, everybody? C-RadTV back with our video. Of course, it's that time of the year. It's NFL playoff time. And which means it's now time to look at the playoff bracket for this year for the NFL, and let's do some playoff bracket predictions. As this is the only playoff bracket prediction video I do where I'm actually enjoying it, unlike the NASCAR one where I want to drink bleach every time I do that playoff prediction. But this one, no, this one doesn't make me want to do that, because this is actually fun to do. So, of course, we start after 18 weeks. We start the year with 32 teams. And now, after 18 weeks of regular season football, we now have our last 14 teams standing. 7 in the AFC, 7 in the NFC. And these 14 will do battle to see who will win the 59th Lombardi trophy down in New Orleans in February. So, let's take a look at this bracket and see who will be that last one standing by the time it's all said and done in New Orleans in February. So, let's get started by looking at the AFC side of brackets. So, first off, we have the Kansas City Chiefs, our back-to-back reigning Super Bowl champions, the number one seed in the AFC again. Just another Kansas City division title, another year that won in the one seed. I mean, Kansas City East, we gotta be one of the favorites on the AFC side with them winning 3 Super Bowls in the last 5 years and making the Super Bowl 4 times in the last 5 years. Even though a lot of people are going to sleep on Kansas City because the offense hasn't been as hot as they have been, Mahomes has had a pretty off year. By part of that's because of Matt Nagy as the offensive coordinator. But the Chiefs have only had a point differential of plus 59 despite going 15-2. I don't know why the fuck everybody's sleeping on Kansas City. You need to stop doing this. You're literally making the same mistakes you made with the Brady and the Patriots. Stop doubting. Because the moment you doubt them, the fucking Chiefs are going to hit that switch and turn it on in the playoffs. And I think that's what's going to happen with the Chiefs. I think everyone's underestimating them again. They're doubting them. They're making the same mistake as before, and I think they're going to hit that switch and magic figure it out. Because we all know the bullshit is real in Kansas City. Let's be honest. We were never free after New England's domination ended. We just went under new management. The Chiefs are now the new boss of the NFL. And to be honest, the Chiefs, they're the same as the old boss, the Patriots. Just the difference is, instead of allegations of cheating, spying, and deflating footballs, the Chiefs are now being accused of rigging and scripting because the bad guys always win in predictable fashion. But the Chiefs, they should still be the front runner to make it out of the AFC to represent the Super Bowl in New Orleans in February. Next up, the number 2 seed, the Buffalo Bills. Another year, another division win for Josh Allen and the Bills in the AFC East. And they actually dominated the AFC East this year. They even locked up the division 5 weeks early. So yeah, and they're actually the only team that actually legitimately beat the Chiefs without the Chiefs resting all their starters in a meaningless Week 18 game. So yeah, but the Bills though, we all know the story. The Bills, they've been able to beat the Chiefs in the regular season. But can they do it in the playoffs when it matters the most? Everyone wants to talk about how this is the Bills' year. Josh Allen's been as a borderline MVP candidate this year. The MVP, it's between him and Lamar Jackson and many others. In terms of MVP this year, there isn't really a clear-cut number runaway MVP frontrunner. There's 4 or 5 players you can make an argument for MVP. There isn't a clear-cut choice for MVP this season. But yeah, in terms of the Bills, I've heard the hype all year. I've tried to buy in the Bills hype the last couple years. They've let everybody down since 2020. Since 2020, they haven't made it past the second round since then. Can the Bills actually get it done in the playoffs? That's been the question. Can they beat the Chiefs this time? That's going to be the question. All I say to Bills is, if you want everyone to take you serious, beat the Chiefs at Arrowhead when it matters the most, and then we'll talk. Next up, Baltimore Ravens. They win the AFC North for the second year in a row. And, they started the year off pretty slow and rough, but they've been able to turn things on the last month or two. They're usually one of the hottest teams coming into the playoffs in the AFC. Lamar Jackson, it's looking pretty likely he'll win a second straight MVP title and his third in 6 years. But, we all know the Ravens are really good in the regular season. But Lamar in the playoffs has struggled in the playoffs. Like, because playing in the regular season's one thing. Playing in the playoffs is a whole totally different animal. We all know the Ravens. They have the talent to get it done. Can they get it done when it matters the most? That's been the one thing eluding Lamar Jackson now. He's a great regular season quarterback, but he hasn't had any playoff success to back it up. Like this year for the Ravens, I'm not buying the Ravens hype. This year, Baltimore, you actually have to prove something to me. If you want me to take Baltimore serious this year, wake me up when you make the Super Bowl, and then we'll talk. So yeah, Baltimore, they need playoff success. That's like the one thing now remaining in Lamar Jackson's resume. Next up, the Houston Texans. Well, Houston, they did win the AFC South, but that division was fucking weak as shit, so Houston mainly won that division by default because everybody else in that division sucks ass. This year has just honestly been a down year for Houston. Like, Houston has been very inconsistent this year. Like, they've been very hot or cold. They've been inconsistent as all hell this year. But still got in because they play in a very weak division. CJ Stroud, he hasn't looked like the same QB he was last year. Like, definitely that sophomore slump has got to him, and he's been off his game this year. I honestly felt like the Texans should be would have been a lot better this year. They've been pretty disappointing this year. Just definitely taking a step back from what they were a year ago. So my expectations for Houston aren't that pretty high. They were high before the season, but during the season, they just have not looked the same as last year. Next up, the Los Angeles Chargers. Man, it's crazy how much a difference a year can make. All you had to do was just get rid of Brandon Staley, and you're back in it. Like, the Chargers have looked like a totally different team with Jim Harbaugh running the show. Jim Harbaugh has really turned things around. He's helped really take Justin Herbert's development to the next level. The Chargers just look like a very improved team, though. But we all know the Chargers' history in the playoffs. Can they shed that label with Jim Harbaugh? Because keep in mind, every time Jim Harbaugh has coached a team into the playoffs, they've at least made it to the third round. But that was with San Francisco. And the LA Chargers are not San Francisco. Plus, that was also in the NFC. And the AFC is a whole totally different beast compared to the NFC. But who knows? Maybe with Harbaugh running the show, the Chargers can finally win a playoff game. We'll have to see. Next up, the Pittsburgh Steelers. The standard truly is the standard. Another winning record season for Mike Tomlin. He keeps a streak alive of consecutive winning seasons without a losing season to start a coaching career. I believe it's like now 19 straight seasons or some shit. Like Tomlin has been very consistent so far, staying above 500. But, it's just another typical Steelers season. I mean, the Steelers started the season off very hot. They're like 9-3, 10-3 at one point in the year. But they have been very cold coming into the playoffs as the Steelers have come in on a 4-game losing streak. Like, honestly, this season is just being comparable to 2020 when the Steelers started 11-0 in 2020 and then lost 5 of their last 6 to go in the playoffs and then went one and done, losing to a divisional rival in the Cleveland Browns in the first round. Honestly, it's starting to look like that same route, especially because late in the year, that was when the Steelers had to go play real teams, like the Chiefs and the Ravens, and then a red-hot Bengals team near the end of the year. Like, honestly, the Steelers start the year off hot, but they're honestly going down a similar collapse that the 2022 Eagles went on, last year's Eagles went on, and the 2020 Steelers went on. And I think it's going to go down that same path. My expectations are very low on the Steelers. They're looking like a first-round elimination. And then our final team in the AFC, the Denver Broncos. The Bronco country has rode straight into the playoffs for the first time in 8 years. Like, the last time the Denver Broncos made the playoffs, that was the year they won Super Bowl 50, a.k.a. Peyton Manning's last ride. As the Broncos have finally made it back in with Coach Sean Payton and with rookie QB Bo Nix. Like, honestly, this is just kind of reminiscent of the 2015 Broncos squad. Just very inconsistent QB play, but they have a very elite defense to help carry the squad to relevance. And the Broncos got in, mainly they got in because they beat the shit out of Kansas City's second and third string practice squad. But, they were able to get the job done and get in. But, the expectations are pretty low, especially with Bo Nix. Just a learning experience for this young Denver team. I think a lot of Bronco fans are just happy to be back in the dance. But hey, you made the dance, you have a chance. Who knows? Could the Broncos defense carry them deep in the playoffs? It's a possibility, but I have my doubts. Especially with some of the matchups they're going to have to deal with in the playoffs. But yeah, Denver, at least you're back in the dance finally. Now we switch on over to the NFC side of the bracket. For the NFC side, let's go through the 7 teams that made it in. So the first one, we have our number 1 seed, the Detroit Lions. The first time in this team's franchise history, they go into playoffs as the number 1 seed. And it's the first time the Lions have won back-to-back NFC North Division titles since the NFL-AFL merger in 1970. So yeah, it's been a hot minute since Detroit has been division champs in back-to-back years. As Detroit this year has proved that last year was no fluke. And that they picked right back up where they left off. At one point, winning 11 straight games. And the crazy about this Lions squad is they've been able to win 15 games and continue this type of winning, despite having nearly 20 players from defense on injury reserve. Like, seriously, this team just keeps winning. Everybody doubts them. They keep winning. Injuries get handed to this defense like candy. They keep winning. Like, the Lions are just a cockroach this year. They just will not die. Like, honestly, it just shows how great of a coach Dan Campbell is. It also helps, too, when Jared Goff is playing at an MVP level. And you have great running back play from Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Even though Montgomery did get banged up near the end of the year and missed the last 3 games, Montgomery will be back. David Montgomery will be back in time for the divisional round for the playoffs when Detroit has their first playoff game. So Sonic and Knuckles will be back in business in the second round. But let's be honest, for Detroit, the expectation this year is a Super Bowl. Anything short of a Super Bowl for this team will be considered a failure. It's Super Bowl or bust for this team. Without a doubt. And this Lions team, this is easily the best Lions team this Lions team has ever produced. They literally broke every single record there was in franchise history just to beat everybody else in the North. Because out of both division titles, this one's the more impressive of the two, considering how competitive the NFC North was, because it was the most competitive division in NFL history. I mean, the most wins 4 teams combined for. You literally had 3 of the 4 teams win at least 11 games each. And Detroit was the one that came out on top. Can the Lions run the table and make their first Super Bowl in franchise history? We'll find out this January. Next up, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles have bounced back and have won the NFC East for the second time in 3 years and are the number 2 seed coming in. The Eagles have had great offense and defensive play. They've been a bit inconsistent though in offense. There's been some beef between Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. But despite that, the Eagles have been able to go 14-3 and get the number 2 seed, even dismantling their division outside of 1 loss to Washington. They were able to dismantle the Giants and the Cowboys pretty easily. As the Eagles, they got the talent. They got the run game, especially with Saquon Barkley getting 2,000 yards, having the greatest season by a running back since, Eric Dickerson in the 80s. So yeah, Saquon Barkley, he actually entered the MVP conversation this year too with his 2,000-yard rushing season. As Saquon Barkley this year, he became the player that New York Giants fans thought they were getting with him until he realized they couldn't. As yeah, he has lived up to that generational running back type that he had coming out of college back in 2018. But yeah, can Barkley carry the Eagles to the promised land? It's not going to be an easy challenge, especially if you have to face some Motor City muscle in the NFC title game. But you got to get there first, and there are some pretty tough teams in this bracket to keep an eye on. Especially Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, they're back in the playoffs again, winning the NFC South, and they're the 3 seed. So yeah, this year it turns out that Baker Mayfield actually can live up to expectations. He didn't fold when he had expectations for once. Because, let's be honest, Baker Mayfield, he's had a pretty borderline MVP season, too. He's put up borderline MVP numbers as well. Like, Baker Mayfield is easily one of the most underrated teams in the league, one underrated QBs in the league this year. Just flies right on the radar. It seems like Baker Mayfield, he always thrives as the underdog. And that's what the Tampa Bay is right now, as an underdog team. And they've thrived under that role. And they get back in. I'll be honest, I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Bucs. I think the Bucs are easily one of the biggest sleeper teams coming into the playoffs. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Tampa Bay. Like, I would not sleep on Tampa. I think they're going to go a lot further than people may think. Plus, Tampa has been able to do something not many teams have been able to do this year, as Tampa is the only team in the NFC to beat both Philadelphia and Detroit this season. So, the Tampa Bay, they've been able to knock off the top 2 seeds in the conference this year. Can they do it in the playoffs when it matters the most? Because we all know if Tampa wants to go back to the Super Bowl, they're going to have to beat both Philly and Detroit to get there. And I think Tampa has the talent to do it. Tampa definitely has the talent. I think a lot of people are sleeping on them. So, yeah, I think Tampa may surprise people. Next up, our 4th seed, the Los Angeles Rams. Well, the Rams, they took advantage of an injury-riddled division this year. Because let's be honest, whoever won the NFC West this year won it by default, because every team in that division got banged up to hell and back. Because literally every team in the NFC West was being held together by glue and duct tape. And the Rams took advantage of it, especially San Fran. San Fran got banged up the most. Because if San Fran was healthy throughout the year, the 49ers would have won the NFC West easily. Just in the end, the Rams had an opportunity, and they took advantage of it, and they're back in the playoffs. As Stafford now has his 2nd division title. As the Rams, they could go deep under the right circumstances. But, the offense has been like a light switch. They've been hot or cold and inconsistent. One moment they're pretty good, next moment they're cold. So, it really depends on what offense we get in the playoffs. Will the offense stay hot or will it get cold? Like, they're a light switch. They're either on or they're off. When they're on, they're on. When they're off, they're really off. Next up, the 5 seed, the Minnesota Vikings. Well, the Vikings, they're pioneers this year, because Minnesota this year, they're the first team in NFL history to win 14 games in a season and not win their division, breaking the previous record set by Tennessee in 1999 for most wins in a season without a division title, when Tennessee went 13-3 in 1999 and failed to win the AFC, their division, because Jacksonville went 14-2. This one, Minnesota went 14-3, but they lost out in a Week 18 winner-take-all game because of Detroit going 15-2. Like, you could argue that Minnesota this year has been Detroit's greatest rival, because Minnesota pushed Detroit so far to where Detroit literally had to break every single franchise record they had just to beat the Vikings this year. But honestly, the Vikings have kind of looked pretty cold this year. Their schedule's been pretty soft this year. Like, every time Minnesota's had to play a real team, they've usually had issues and struggled. Especially losing to Detroit twice this season, as Detroit is the only team that has beaten Minnesota twice this year. So for minutes, and we all saw in Week 18 that the Vikings kind of shit the bed, and when it mattered the most. That Sam Darnold, he struggled when the lights were at its brightest, when everything was on the line, and in the playoffs, everything is on the line every week. So can the Vikings bounce back? Or are they looking very fraudulent right now again, like in 2022? It'll be interesting to see what they do in the playoffs. Next up, Washington Commanders. Washington is back in the playoffs for the first time since 2020. In fact, they've won 12 games this year. It's it's crazy how much a difference a year can make. Because a year ago, Washington was so fucking terrible. Bottom of the league, they had the 2nd overall pick. They brought in Jaden Daniels at QB. They brought in Dan Quinn as a head coach, and hey, Jaden Daniels, he ended up in the right people in the right situation at the right time. And and it shows how much a difference a year can make. From bottom of the league to making the playoffs and winning 12 games this year, which this is the most they've won in a season since the 90s. I think the last time Washington won this many games, it was the last time they won a Super Bowl. And that was back when Joe Gibbs was still coaching the team, before Joe Gibbs went and started a NASCAR team. So yeah, also Washington, they've honestly been a fun story to watch and pay attention to throughout the year. Like, it's kind of crazy how much likable Washington is once you get rid of that piece of shit Dan Snyder and you get better ownership in. You know, the main question for Washington is this year just a fluke where they're only good every 4 or 5 years? Or is this the sign? Is this just the signal of the new norm? You know, I still say this, Washington, you still need to get a new stadium, though, because FedEx Field is still a fucking dump. But hey, Washington, welcome back to the dance. Like, honestly, my expectations for Washington aren't too high. I think this is just a learning experience this year, where they're just going to learn the system and try and come back and be stronger next year. Yes, if this year isn't just a fluke where they only are good once every 4 or 5 years. But hey, Jaden Daniels, I think, is easily the front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year, that's for sure. And looking like the best QB so far in the 2024 NFL draft class. Definitely better than Caleb Williams right now, that's for fucking sure. But hey, Washington, welcome back to the dance at least. And then finally, we get to the 7th seed, the Green Bay Packers. As once again, the Packers have bullshitted their way back into the playoffs in year 2 of the post-Aaron Rodgers era. Back-to-back years, they've been the 7th seed. And of course, this year, they were the 3rd place team in the very competitive NFC North. Behind Minnesota and Detroit, who combined to win 29 games. And with Green Bay's 11 wins, that combines for 40 wins out of these 3 teams in the North. Just, you know, Green Bay, they've been pretty good against bad teams, but all of Green Bay's losses this year, outside of the Week 18 loss to Chicago, 5 of their 6 losses this year have come to playoff teams. 2 of them to Detroit, 2 to Minnesota, and then losing to Philadelphia in Week 1 in Brazil. And we all know, so yeah, Green Bay has struggled against good teams. So yeah, Green Bay's been pretty inconsistent this year. They've been very hit or miss. You know, Jordan Love has struggled throughout the year. Like, honestly, Malik Willis has played better than Jordan Love this year. But we already know the Packers are committed to Jordan Love in the long term, especially with how much money they're throwing at Jordan Love on his new contract. But honestly, the expectations for Green Bay are very low. Like, Green Bay is easily screaming first-round elimination. Like, just nothing really inspiring from with Green Bay in this squad. Like, Green Bay, the bar's very low. They're going to be an easy round 1 elimination. So, with all that said, here's what the playoff bracket looks like in our wildcard matchups. As this predictions video also serves as my wildcard predictions video. So, of course, if anyone's wondering how I did in Week 18 for my picks, for anyone wondering, I went 11-5 last week. So my regular season record for this year was 190-79. But we all know the playoffs are a totally different beast compared to the regular season. So here are the wildcard matchups. We got Denver versus Buffalo. Buffalo is favored by 8.5 points. Then we got Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Baltimore is favored by 10 points. And then we got the LA Chargers and the Houston Texans on the AFC side. And the Chargers are favored over Houston by 2.5 points. On the NFC side, we got Green Bay versus Philadelphia. Philadelphia is favored by 4.5 points. Then we got Washington versus Tampa Bay. Tampa is favored by 3 points. And then we got Minnesota versus the LA Rams. The Vikings are favored by 1 point in that game. And of course, Detroit and Kansas City, they're the only teams that have round 1 bye, so they're in the second round. So, out of the 12 teams that play in the wild card round, which 6 do I have moving on to the divisional round? So, here are the teams I have moving on to the second round of the playoffs, and of course, my winners are highlighted in green. So, I'll go through each winner I have, and I'll explain why I have each team winning. So, first off, I have Buffalo beating Denver in the wild card round. even though Denver's defense is great, I think the Broncos defense will keep it a close game, but I'm not buying it against the Bills. I think Josh Allen and the Bills will just be too much to handle. I don't think Bills cover that spread. I think it's going to be a closer game than people may think. I got Buffalo winning by 3 points over Denver. I think the Broncos defense is going to keep it a close game. So give me Buffalo in that one. I have Baltimore over Pittsburgh. I'll be honest for this one. I almost wanted to take Pittsburgh because of the point spread. Because I think it's fucking absurd to favor a team by 10 points in a playoff game. Like, that's fucking absurd. But Pittsburgh has just struggled throughout the last 4 weeks. They've struggled against good teams. I don't see it being any different. I think they could play Baltimore close, though, because it's a very big bad blood rivalry between the Ravens and Steelers. But Baltimore, I think, will come out on top on that one. I got Baltimore by 5 over Pittsburgh in that one. And then the Chargers and Texans, I got the Chargers winning on the road in Houston. I'm just not buying it from Houston. The Chargers have been a very improved team under Jim Harbaugh. And I think the Texans, after all the progress they made last year, I think this year, I just think Houston takes a step back. I don't think that one's going to be too close. I got the Chargers winning that one by 6 points over the Texans. On the NFC side, I have Philadelphia beating Green Bay. I just think the Eagles are going to be too much for Philadelphia to handle. I mean, Green Bay, they don't have Christian Watson because he got injured in Week 18, so Watson's out for the year. And Jordan Love will be playing through an elbow injury, but then again, who isn't playing through an injury in the playoffs, to be honest? Nobody's really healthy at this point in the year. And even if Jalen Hurts doesn't play, since he's still technically under concussion protocol, I think Kenny Pickett can get the job done against the Packers if it comes down to it. So I have the Eagles winning that game. I think Green Bay might keep it close, like the Brazil matchup. But in this matchup between these two, which will be on American soil this time, I got Philadelphia coming out on top. Now, next one, I got Washington over Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay over Washington. This was a very tough game to predict. I know a lot of people are picking Washington over Tampa Bay. I'm not buying it, though. I'll be honest, this was a game I had a hard time predicting. I was back and forth in this one. At one point, I had Tampa. One point, I had Washington. I was back and forth on it. I could not decide a winner. In the end, I think a lot of people are sleeping on Tampa Bay. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on Baker Mayfield. The one thing that led me to go with Tampa Bay here is that every time Baker Mayfield has made the playoffs, Baker has won at least one playoff game every time he's made the playoffs, and I think that trend continues. And I think Baker gets another playoff win. I got Tampa Bay winning at home. However, I would not be surprised in the slightest if Washington pulled it off on the road in Tampa Bay. I would not be surprised in the slightest. But I'm going to give the edge to Tampa. I just think Tampa is just a better team over Washington. I'm going to take Tampa. Tampa's not going to be an easy out, that's for sure. And in the final one, I got the Rams winning at home against the Vikings. Yes, I'm picking a 14-win team to go one and done. Honestly, I think the Vikings are falling apart. I think we all saw what Sam Darnold really is. We all saw that when the lights were at its brightest, he could not get it done. And he crumbled like a graham cracker. Let me just say this for everyone that wants to hype up Sam Darnold. He couldn't get it done in a Week 18 winner-take-all season finale against Detroit when it mattered the most. When the lights were at its brightest, he folded. If he couldn't get it done in a Week 18 winner-take-all game, what makes you think a wild card game in prime time will be any different on the road? So I think Sam Darnold folds once again in prime time, and I got the Rams moving on to the second round. So I got Stafford winning another playoff game. So, for my divisional matchups, I have the LA Chargers versus Kansas City, Jim Harbaugh versus Andy Reid, and also Justin Herbert versus Patrick Mahomes. And also on the AFC side in the divisional round, I got Baltimore versus Buffalo. So we got Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen, the two front runners for the MVP this year. And it's also John Harbaugh versus Sean McDermott. On the NFC side, I got the LA Rams versus Detroit in the second round, aka Matt Stafford versus Jared Goff again, and Dan Campbell versus Sean McVay. So Stafford once again coming to Detroit for the third time in 12 months. And then also in the divisional round, I got Tampa Bay versus Philadelphia. So, out of these 8 teams, which 4 do I have advancing to the AFC and the NFC championship games, respectively? So here is who I have moving on to the AFC and the NFC championship games, respectively. So, on the AFC side, I got Kansas City beating the LA Chargers. I think people are underestimating the Chiefs once again, and the Chiefs are going to turn it on in the playoffs. Like, the Chiefs are going to hit a switch, that's for sure. They're going to hit it again. I think the Chargers are not going to be able to hang with the Chiefs. Like, the Chiefs are just going to be too much for the Chargers to handle. Plus, I think there's going to be some ref ball mixed in there because the Chiefs have gone bailed out a lot this year by ref ball. So I'm going to take the Chiefs at home against the Chargers. So yeah, I think the Chiefs are just the better team in the AFC West right now over the Chargers. And then Baltimore-Buffalo. I got Buffalo winning this game in a rematch over Baltimore. I'm not really finding it out of Baltimore. Like, honestly, I think the Ravens could pull it off on the road. I mean, the Ravens did give the Bills their first loss of the season earlier this year, but that game was in Baltimore. Buffalo is a different element, plus it's the playoffs. And I'll be perfectly honest, I think Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are going to choke in the playoffs. I think Lamar is going to choke again in the playoffs, and I think it's going to be here against Buffalo. So I got the Bills moving on to the AFC Championship game. And I think for the first time since 2020, I think the Bills will finally make it past the second round. Now on the NFC side, I have Detroit once again beating the LA Rams in the second round. I think once again Jared Goff will reign supreme over his old team. I know a lot of people are talking about how Detroit may not beat Stafford for a third time, but like I said, Detroit's offense has been consistent all year, averaging 33 points a game. The Rams' offense has been very hot or cold this year. Like, it's a light switch. They're either on or off. And you know what? Since I feel like they're gonna be on against the Vikings, and since they are on, I feel like the Rams' offense is gonna be off against Detroit. Plus, I think that 1 week rest what Detroit gets from being the 1 seed, I think that's all they need to get ready for this game. So I got Detroit winning at home against the Rams. I think it's going to be another close game like it was in week 1 to open the season. But I got Detroit once again coming out on top. No overtime required in this one. And then the other matchup, I got Philadelphia beating Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay will put up a fight against Philadelphia. But I think Philadelphia gets revenge. I don't think Tampa Bay beats Philly a second time this season. I think Philly will get payback. Like, if Jalen Hurts doesn't play in the wild card round, I think he'll definitely be playing in the divisional round. And I think Philadelphia gets it done at home. So I'm going to take the Eagles at home in this one over Tampa Bay. So, for my championship games in the third round, the AFC Championship, I got Buffalo versus Kansas City. The Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs again. Sean McDermott versus Andy Reid. On the NFC side, I have it being Philadelphia versus Detroit for the NFC Championship game this year. Jared Goff versus Jalen Hurts. Dan Campbell versus Nick Sirianni. The best 2 coaches from the 2021 head coaching cycle and the last 2 standing from said head coaching hiring cycle. Duking it out. So, out of these 2 championship games, which 2 teams do I have going to Super Bowl 59? AKA, which 2 teams am I jinxing this year because I never learned my lesson? So here is who I have in Super Bowl 59 this year in New Orleans, and I'll go over each winner I have. So for the AFC side, I once again have Kansas City advancing to the Super Bowl, beating Buffalo in the playoffs. I betted on the Bills the last 2 years to make the playoffs, and I've been let down both times. I'm not making that same, and I bet against the Chiefs the last 2 years. I'm not making that same mistake again for a third time, because I know the Bills, they've been able to beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, in the regular season, but Patrick Mahomes is undefeated against Josh Allen in the playoffs when it's mattered the most. So even though the Bills have had Mahomes' number in the regular season, Mahomes has been able to get it done in the playoffs when it's mattered the most. Plus, Andy Reid always does better against the team when they face him a second time. And I think the Chiefs are gonna once again beat the Bills again. and cause more heartbreak in Buffalo. Like, I think a lot of, like, let's be honest, I think a lot of people want the Super Bowl this year to be Detroit versus Buffalo or Baltimore versus Detroit. But I feel like Kansas City's gonna turn the switch, and the Chiefs are gonna bullshit their way back into the Super Bowl. And I think the Chiefs will make the Super Bowl for the 5th time in 6 years. And then on the NFC side, I got Detroit versus Philadelphia. I got Detroit beating Philadelphia in the NFC Championship game. I think that game will be a high-scoring shootout, but I think Detroit can get the job done at home. Honestly, for that matchup, I was simply one of those whoever had home field advantage, I was gonna pick to win, and I think Detroit gets it done at home against Philadelphia. Plus, here's another reason I have Detroit winning, because I think if Philadelphia, if they make it to the 3rd round, if they make it past the 2nd round, I think the Eagle fans are going to be fucking idiots, and they're going to do a We Want Detroit chant. And we all know from what happens with the We Want Boston and the We Want Houston chants, and that one time that Toronto Maple Leaf fans did that We Want Florida chant. Every time somebody has done a We Want blank chant, it has never ended well. And I think Philadelphia is not going to learn their lesson from when they did that, from when Sixer fans did that We Want Boston chant a few years ago. I think they're not going to learn their lesson, and they're going to do a We Want Detroit chant. And I'll say this, Eagle fans, if you want Detroit, you have no idea what you're getting into. You have no idea what you're asking for. Because I think in the NFC title game, I think Philly will get Detroit all right, and they'll get 10 inches of Detroit shoved up their virgin assholes. And I have Detroit pulling it off because some people need to learn the hard way about what happens when you call your shots prematurely. So in the end, my Super Bowl 59 prediction, I think it's going to be Kansas City versus Detroit in Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. So Chiefs make their 5th Super Bowl in 6 years, and I think the Lions will finally make their first Super Bowl appearance in franchise history. So yeah, for of course Detroit, Kansas City, it will be Jared Goff versus Patrick Mahomes, and it will be Dan Campbell versus Andy Reid in the Super Bowl. The 2 best offensive minds in the game today in a duel to the death. So Chiefs, Lions, Super Bowl 59. Who do I have winning Super Bowl 59? So this would actually be a very interesting matchup because both Dan Campbell and Andy Reid are great football minds. There will be a lot of trick plays had in this game. There's also a lot of storylines too because, Detroit, they're trying to win their first Super Bowl and their first championship since 1957 in the pre-Super Bowl era. While the Chiefs, they're trying to become the first team in NFL history to win 3 Super Bowls in a row. So this would be a very interesting matchup. And plus, also adding the fact that, the Chiefs, they're 12-0 when Patrick Mahomes plays in an indoor stadium. However, Jared Goff is 2-0 in his career against Patrick Mahomes. This would also be a first-time Super Bowl matchup, Chiefs and Lions. A lot of storylines to be had, and I think this would be a very high-scoring game between both teams with how much star power there is on both sides of the ball. But here's one thing I should mention here. In all 3 of Kansas City's Super Bowl wins, they never had to face the Dan Campbell coached Lions. And I think the Lions are a very different beast compared to the 49ers and the Eagles teams that the Chiefs had to play in the Super Bowl. I think Detroit is a totally different beast. And I'll just say this here. If Dan Campbell and the Lions can make the Super Bowl, it's right there for the taking. Plus, in all the years that I've done playoff predictions, and every year the Lions have made the playoffs, all those years, I have never picked Detroit to win the Super Bowl. That changes this year. I think this is the year. So yeah, go fuck yourself, Kansas City. I think this is the year Detroit ends the drought. And I have the Lions winning their first Super Bowl in franchise history. I think this is the year Detroit gets it done. And I have Detroit standing tall at the end of the year up in New Orleans at the Superdome. See, I think Detroit will be the one that ends Kansas City's bid at a three-peat. So yeah, I have Detroit finally winning their first Super Bowl in franchise history. Very dominant Lions team, the best team in Lions franchise history. But we all know that won't mean a thing if they don't win that ring. See, I got Detroit winning it all. And I think Detroit finally gets that Lombardi trophy that has long eluded them in their entire existence. And I think the team that's been the butt end of every NFL fan's joke will finally have their moment in the sun. See, I got Detroit winning the Super Bowl this year. So anyway, those are my playoff predictions for this year. That's all I got to say. Hope everyone has a great day. I'll see you all whatever I make next time out. Now watch Super Bowl 59 be a matchup between the Chiefs and the Eagles because life is bullshit.